Appropriations Committee, we're here for fiscal year 2020 budget hearings. I'm Eric Costello, councilman from the 11th District, chair of the committee. I'm joined by Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, member of the committee. Councilman Bill Henry, 4th District, member of the committee.
Thank you,
to my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee, who's been doing a fantastic job all day yesterday for 13 hours. Representing Mayor Jack Young is Jeff Amoros. We are here first for economic development, Baltimore Development Corporation. Kim, if you could please take it away. Please keep your presentation to about 10 minutes if possible.
10? They told me 5. You're being generous this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Clark. I'm the Executive Vice President for Baltimore Development Corporation. I'm joined by our Chief Financial Officer, Jeff Pillis, Comptroller David Damsky, and our Loan Officer, Bernard Smith. So thank you all for having us. This really won't be a lengthy presentation. So as some of you may remember, BDC had several service sectors. Last year, over the past several years, one of those sectors, which involved improving retail districts beyond downtown, most people only heard the word downtown, and we found it very confusing. So we took a look back at our core and actually what we do. And what we do is the retention, expansion, and attraction of business and real estate development for some city-owned properties and assist developers with some other incentives at their request and present to the council. So we eliminated the improved retail districts beyond downtown and took that pot of money that was included in that and divided it up between 809, retention, expansion, and attraction of business, and the real estate development. In addition to that, the Inner Harbor Coordinator function used to fall under BDC. The Waterfront Partnership now deals directly with the city with that, so we are no longer a pass-through for that money, so we will not be presenting the Inner Harbor Coordinator position. So, without any further ado, we can take a look at business expansion, retention, expansion, and attraction of business, Section 809. We've pulled a couple of our outputs up on the screen and provided to you as part of it. So you can see the companies BDC assisted in staying in Baltimore City. We've exceeded all of our targets throughout. You'll see a big bump in FY15 actual. That was because of the riots. The day after the riots, BDC, in partnership with the Small Business Administration and the Maryland Emergency Management, were out on the streets visiting with the businesses that had been affected physically by the riots. So that's why that number is so large. We hit over 400 businesses in the ensuing 3 weeks after the riots and helped them to get back up and running through various incentives that we provided to them. So we've held pretty steady. The dips that you see in 16 and in 19, where they're below 200, were because of staff shortages. We have begun to staff back up, and we are now only have a couple of open positions. So we're pretty proud of that. Also, with the outcomes, you can see the number of jobs created or retained in Baltimore City. So you'll see some sort of quirkiness with that as well. After our first performance audit that was conducted, we looked at how we were measuring things. So in our, sorry, I am really sinusy in the mornings. We looked at the way we were measuring. So the way that we used to record things, and I'm going to use the Harbor Point TIF as an example because it's the easiest. When we would record in our results report, for instance, our staff getting the Harbor Point TIF through the City Council Board of Estimates process and eventually getting the tranche of bonds approved and issued, we would record that as all of the jobs that were proposed to be on the Harbor Point site as a result of that TIF. So that's why you see like 10,000 in 17, but that wasn't the Harbor Point, it was earlier. But I think we recorded like 17,000 jobs for that particular in that year. Well, what were actually created the next year were like 11 because that was the only jobs. But then you had the Exelon, and that created several hundred jobs. So we took a look at it, and what we now do is record the expected jobs year over year so that you won't see like a recording of like 10,000 jobs in any one year, unless, of course, some company comes in and brings 9,000 jobs with it. So that's why you see some of the little discrepancies. Since that FY17, we have done our recording differently. So, are you guys good with that? I can move on. Yeah. In looking at real estate development, now what's important to recognize in the real estate development, this is the BDC pipeline. So not every real estate project in the city is going to come through BDC. These are ones that we have touched in some fashion, be it a request for some sort of incentive, city property that we're disposing of and getting redeveloped, or some other way that BDC staff has touched that. So the number of commercial corridor facades completed, that has been a pretty steady number. We're pretty proud of that program, and it's something that we will consistently ask for capital money because it has such a great impact on the area. Councilwoman Snead, I know we've been working with you over on Monument Street on the cluster facade, so we're really looking forward to that being completed. Because of the impact that they make, the cluster facades, so the facades were great, but it was like one here, one there in these districts. And a couple of us were driving around one day and we said, you know, we should do these in groups. We should figure out a way to get property owners of a whole block that want to be involved with this program. So that's why we've looked at, we now have Liberty Heights, the unit block of Howard Street, 2300 block of Monument Street, and Frederick Avenue is our next grouping. So we're trying to spread it around the city in some areas that, so the Main Street areas have a Main Street manager that can help them and move that along. We're trying to look at some areas that might not have that embedded help within the community. So very successful, big bang for our buck, because most of these are matching, not all of them are matching. We've also started doing some in some of the industrial areas. We use some of the casino money that has been assigned to us to do some facades in Carroll Camden. So from that, we're now starting to bleed off and do some in some of the other industrial areas. So the dollar value of private investment per dollar public investment, we're really proud of. Because much of this is for small investment like facades, you're not going to see, like SBA, I think says what, $37 per? $38,000. You're not going to see that with a facade improvement grant. You know, a business owner is going to put in $1,000 and we're going to put in a couple thousand, you know, we're going to match that. So you're not going to see that amount, but we're really proud of it. Years ago, it was 3-to-1, so we're really proud of what we've been able to do there. And then our Emerging Technology Center. The Emerging Technology Center's sort of parent was established in 1991 over on Key Highway at 1414 Key Highway in a building that Jay Birdie used to describe with a leaking roof with buckets under all the leaks in the roof. In 1998, I believe it was, we moved into the Can Company over in Canton with help from some EDA money. That has been very successful. Following that, we opened a location on 33rd Street, the former Eastern High School. Since that time, and again, we used EDA money. The lease was recently up on 33rd Street, and because we've moved our model and the private sector has taken over as well, we decided just to stick with the one location on Haven Street. Haven Street's been very, very successful, and it's to the point where our Emerging Technology Center executive director actually goes to the privately run incubators and shows them how to do things and talks with them on how to do things. So we're very pleased with the Emerging Technology Center and the strides that it's made. Our biggest jump in the number of jobs created is coming through what we call folks that they keep their business at home, but they come into the ETC to learn about legal documents, accounting, and other things like that. And they pay us a monthly fee, and they don't use any of the real estate. So that's why we're able to maintain the number of jobs with only having the one location. So with that, I'll stop and entertain questions.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks for your steady leadership during the transition. First question is the cybersecurity incident that impacted BDC.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's laughing. The first job that I had as interim president was to sit down the staff, because most of them are young folks like you guys. And I try to explain to them that you can be successful by calling people on the phone and handwriting notes. That you can be successful doing that. Not everything has to be done through email. So once we got over that hump, so what we've done, a lot of folks have been out on the streets actually inventorying various business districts so they can get a handle on who we've met with and when, and who we haven't met with. And so they've been out on the streets a lot. And then we went out and purchased a number of laptops, and a lot of them are sharing it. We created BDC Gmails for everybody. A couple of folks got shut down during the Google shutdown, but then once we explained what was going on, we got right back up. We've been using Google Docs to stockpile everything. The biggest frustration is the loss of documents, because all of our documents were on the network. So we've had to recreate a lot of legal documents where before it was very easy for staff just to go in and take a right of entry and adjust it, have the law department review it, and then we could use it. Now we actually have to have the law department draft those things, and again, dealing by phone. So it's more frustration than anything. Because we're not on the city's payroll, Dave was able from his home computer to do the payroll. We've been getting everything. We've been trying to maintain as normal as we can, but our fax machine went down too, because that's tied into the printer. So Jeff was very frustrated about that.
So the reason I asked the question is the incident occurred on or around May 6th. I'm curious as to any communication that the city's CIO, Frank Johnson, had with you, if any at all.
None. He didn't even know we were on the network.
Okay.
You know me, I'm brutally honest. I mean, I was...
That's what I'm looking for,
yeah.
Brutally honest. I appreciate that. Kim, can you talk a little bit about how BDC plans to partner with DHCD on their new community development framework that they recently released?
BDC?
Yes, if at all.
So we work very closely with our partners at DHCD. We work with them on the choice neighborhoods, both one in East Baltimore and now the one that they're studying in West Baltimore. DHCD is our sign-off on anything, so they've always been our partner and will continue to be our partner. All of our neighborhood folks work closely with the folks at DHCD on any type of initiative. So it's a true partnership. Michael and Colin will continue to meet, just as Michael and Bill did, every couple of weeks. So it's a good relationship.
Thank you. We've been joined by Vice President of the Council, Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee. Councilman Henry.
Hi there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I will be having further conversations with you and Mr. Beckford about RBDLs and business improvement districts, but my love and respect for both of you is enough such that I don't feel the need to have that conversation here. The question I had was just the incredible disparity in the real estate development page. And I mean, we can talk about that now. The dollar value of private investment per dollar of public investment between FY16 and, well, definitely FY17 and then kind of everything since then. Why was FY16 so high?
Port Covington.
Oh.
And are you looking at
I'm
are you
looking-
looking at this page in the book
No,
or
I'm
my
looking at-
presentation?
I'm looking at this.
Yeah, it's Port Covington. There's a typo on this page in the book.
What's the page number for that?
Well, I don't know, because I've got like 3 different pages. It could be I think it's 334.
Gotcha.
It's the business retention, expansion, and attraction of business, and the outcome, private investment leverage through BDC programs in millions. It says 6468.2 million, and it should be 646.8 million.
What? You didn't do $6.5 billion worth of investment?
Well, we tried, but we were a little short-staffed that year.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's 334 in volume 1 of the agency detail. Yeah, okay. So Port Covington,
It's because of the estimated private investment that would take place at Port Covington
Okay.
versus
so
the TIF.
so these numbers these numbers reflect a projection of what the project will be when it's completed.
Yes.
If it begins with the public, it's booked the year of the investment.
Correct. It's
Gotcha.
booked the year, so, geez, now you sound like my staff. So it's the year that the public action took place. So for instance, a pilot. It's the fiscal year that the pilot got approved by the Board of Estimates.
And so the value of the projected value of the project gets booked that year.
Correct.
For this purpose.
Correct.
Okay.
But what we've done is change the way the jobs are recorded so that the jobs get recorded or estimated for a particular year as they would happen year over year, rather than trying to convince you all that Harbor Point's we're going to blink and there's going to be 17,000 jobs at Harbor Point.
So and this is both a budget question and a BDC question. So when you're coming up with this outcome, the way you determine this metric is a collaborative process?
Yes, that's right. The process in the last 2 years roughly has been agency working with both BBMAR and CityStat to review and sign off on the measures.
Okay.
I don't believe CityStat has gotten to BDC with this review.
We don't do city stat.
So
You
They
wanna?
tried and failed.
Well, they're starting again. There's gonna be a new city stat run by.
I mean, we're happy to, but it's just years ago under, I think it was the O'Malley administration. I don't know, I'm on my 6th mayor, so bear with me here. I think it was under the O'Malley administration, there was this thing called development stat, and that's how they tried to deal with BDC. But in Bob's defense, I mean, he was great working with us and we helped him to understand why the improving retail districts beyond downtown service needed to go away and how we could apply those measurements to these other two.
Okay. All right, I guess that's it. I mean, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If there are others who have questions, I'm happy to stop.
I have questions.
Okay, then I'll stop.
Sneed.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you mentioned that you have a number of openings, and I'm just curious of how many openings you have with staff.
I gave Marguerite the org chart.
Okay. And I mean, do you know
So
about-
as most recently as January, we had 8 openings. And Bill Cole, former president and CEO Bill Cole, and I took a look at things. We made some changes in the org chart so that we feel like the org chart is really where it should have been a long time ago, where this is how we really should be doing business. So we've done a lot of recent hires. We've got a lot of fresh faces and energetic folks. So I think we're down to 2 economic development officers and an administrative position.
Would you know offhand how many of those folks are city residents that are in your office?
It's something that we make a priority, even though we can't demand it. So most of our new hires, let me see, all of the most recent hires are city residents.
Nice. You know how many that would be? Just
Of the last 6, all of them are.
Oh, good. And then my next question is, what's BDC's total budget inclusive of the city's contribution? Do you have that number?
Question again? What's BDC's total budget inclusive of the city's contribution? Inclusive of the city's contribution, so I think it's what's on this budget page.
It's about 5.2 of the city, and we're about 6.9.
Can you come to the microphone and state who you are?
Here it is. It's right. It's on this page right here.
Got it. Okay, and so,
Yeah. That was supposed to be in the budget book, Councilwoman, but it didn't make the budget book, so I brought it as a handout
got
today.
it. Okay, and so, besides the city, who else do we receive money from, I guess? Who do we see?
We get some grant revenue, and we also receive some fees through services that we provide, various types of services.
Is there anything that we can do funding-wise, or if there are any grants out there to do more of what was done on Monument Street?
So if you look at the org chart, there's this team called Strategy, Research, and Analytics, and that team has been charged with looking and thinking outside the box on some grants and other funding that would be available to us. In addition to which, the incoming president and I have had several discussions about just that would enable us to do some things, because the use of city funds limits us in so many ways, that if we had some outside funding, we could do more, especially when it comes to the business retention, attraction, and expansion.
Got it. So far, from what I see, it makes a total difference on Monument Street. I would love to see that, like in West Baltimore as well, and some of the other main streets, because it makes a huge difference. Just that little bit of work in that cluster.
Right, and that comes from the city's capital funding. So we continue to request. I mean, I think this year we got $1 million to spend in the whole city, because of the way that the capital got allotted this year. So we'll do the best we can. Luckily, we have some unspent dollars from prior years that we'll be able to use. Because again, we find that facade program, other programs that have been very effective is the microloan program, our innovation fund. We requested money for a smart food loan program that was denied. So we're always trying to think outside the box of various ways to spend it. We also are talking with the lending community about different ways that we can position their money in the neighborhoods.
Okay. If someone else has questions, I know I asked the number.
Kim, one of the things that Bill Cole testified about last year is that an inspiring entrepreneur, more than anything, needs a business plan. Can you talk about what BDC is doing in terms of assisting businesses in that capacity?
So our ETC continues their great work as an incubator program and an entrepreneurial growth program. In addition to that, you'll notice on the org chart that we have under business development, Sean, and I'm going to mess up his name, Gornate, I believe. He's now hired and he's working in our IT sector. So that means working with everyone in the IT sector, from our cybersecurity companies, both established and helping to grow those, as well as working with the ETC companies and other incubators and inspiring that entrepreneurial spirit. In addition to which, we have our where we go out into the neighborhoods once a month in partnership with MOED and working with our small businesses. We may have lenders lined up. We may just go out on our own with our own loan programs and actually meet with the businesses and help them to grow and expand.
Thank you. Councilwoman Middleton.
On your chart, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Could you explain what's Made in Baltimore?
Made in Baltimore is a program that was formerly in the planning department, where it's a program that helps trademark local businesses coming out of maker spaces that may not be able to yet afford their own shop. So there's a Made in Baltimore shop up on West North Avenue that it's all local makers. So it might be jewelry, it might be soap, it could be anything. We've also trademarked the logo Made in Baltimore, and we're looking at licensing the Made in Baltimore actual businesses so that they can, we're looking at a shop at the airport where there's a whole section that's Made in Baltimore. We've licensed it. We can collect a license fee, but it also enables these makers to sell their goods in these shops.
We've been joined by,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, we've been
And
joined by
then-
Council President Scott. Sorry.
I just want to kind of elaborate on Cross Keys and the business area there. Do you have any,
I was just lamenting with Joanne Levin on my way in.
because I know there was some recent advertisement announcement with Harbor.
Yeah, it's a privately owned center, and we can try to encourage. Unfortunately, it's an out-of-town privately owned investor who has some premier properties but isn't not one of the better actors. So we continue to push, but actually our main contact with them left a couple of months ago. So trying to build up a relationship again with folks. Yeah, they're not good players.
Yeah, I have a community meeting. With
Right,
them
and we're
too.
scheduled, we'll have some folks there with you.
Good, good. Yeah, it's really like the first kind of big meeting in a long, long time there. So they're just kind of lost on what to do and the value of their property. And
Sure.
thank goodness for, I guess, the Marriott's going to be taking over the Radisson.
Right,
And then we still have Talbot's there. So, yeah.
right.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Can you talk about how hard it is to get businesses here, or how easy it is to get businesses here, and who are we competing against for, you know, the reason we may have so many vacancies in different areas?
So the easiest way for us to do job growth, and this is true of anywhere, your easiest way to do job growth is by helping your already existing businesses to expand. And attracting businesses, we mostly rely upon our partners at the State Department of Commerce. And now there's changes at Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore, so we hope to engage them as partners once again with this. But what we find is that attending conferences, even local conferences like Maryland Economic Development Association, where there are site selection folks there, meeting with them, getting to know them. So we recently met with a gentleman that is a site selection person, and fingers crossed, we could be getting a company with a few hundred jobs coming to Baltimore. It's a high-tech company. We're competing with Atlanta, who has a great transportation system. Most of the time, Councilwoman, we're competing with Pittsburgh, Richmond, St. Louis.
And so besides transportation being an issue that we clearly need to work on, the state needs to work on, what other else can you remember are the top priorities of?
So what folks normally look for is a good workforce. And now things have changed. It used to be they went right for the school system, went right for housing costs. Now folks are looking at amenities, so public parks, trails, playgrounds. Folks, I mean, they're looking for places where folks can gather, activities where they can gather. They're also looking at, I don't know how else to describe it, but niche communities. LGBTQBT, I think is how it's described. African American communities, Jewish communities, Catholic communities. I mean, they're looking at like where's their niche and where do their employees, what do they do when they're not at work? And they're looking for those type things. It's like it's not that they don't even think about the school system. They look at the public school system, but depending upon the salary range, they may be looking for what's the private school system like. But it's really those public amenities that, like a promenade or a Patterson Park or a Druid Hill Park, a Gwynns Falls Trail, those type things.
And you weren't included on our youth panel yesterday, but I'm just curious because you do work with businesses. Do you know what they say in reference to why they're not hiring our youth workers or why they are not giving money towards the Youth Works program?
Most of our large businesses are, and most of the small mom and pop businesses just can't afford it. I mean, it's literally the mom and pop working in there. We can try to help further that. We've tried over the years. We hire a couple, bring them into the office, and then we even take a few of them like out on the streets to meet the businesses. So it sometimes can be tough with the smaller ones, but we try to encourage the over 50 employees to do such.
And that's like annually, do you guys send something out to them or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
We've been joined by Vice Chair of the committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District. Councilman Henry. And we've also been joined by Michael Huber, Chief of Staff to the Council President, and Rebecca Tabb from the Council President's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other question I wanted to ask, and this arose out of a site visit I had the other day. I visited the offices / manufacturing space for citywide youth development down, I guess, in Port Covington, City Garage area, and they make sorbet. They make sorbet on site. They sell it from carts outside of and inside the stadium and around downtown. And when I asked, "Are you selling out of any retail locations?" they said, "No, we're going to be opening a little place in West Baltimore next year. Maybe if they're lucky, it'll open end of this year." And I said, no, I mean, like, not just your own place, but I mean, you make bulk sorbet and prepackaged. Like, do you sell from, like, do you have any other places that sell? And they're like, oh no, that would be great. And that made me think, for all of the different places that we have now where, like Be More Kitchen, where we're helping people make the next jump to do larger and larger amounts of manufacturing, is there any place that tries to help place manufactured products in retail operations?
So two. One is the Made in Baltimore, and the other is Kristen Dawson, who's head of our business development, is really working very, very hard and has her team working hard at just that.
Okay, so I should be sending them to Kristen, and it's that simple.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Council President.
Hello, ma'am.
How are you?
Great. Good morning, and thank you for being here, and thank for all your hard work. Just got to
Thank
follow
you.
up on a few things. Last year, then Director Cole stated that BDC was in the process of hiring an equity coordinator. I believe we've filled that position, correct?
Do you have
how's
the
it-
org chart?
No, not yet. I don't have it actually.
I brought org chart, so you can see Stephanie Shu is our equity manager.
Great, thank you. And how does this coordinator work with BDC to incorporate considerations of equity into the work of BDC that you do every day?
So Stephanie, in cooperation with the senior staff and now the full staff, has presented an equity, I don't want to say program, but sort of guidelines for equity involvement in all that we do. In addition to that, we have her, she's been doing a little bit of a traveling show over the last 9 months, going to other areas and just kind of seeing what's up. There's a couple of different, like, sort of national/international groups that sponsor these conferences. So a couple of them have been able to accommodate her that we didn't have to pay, and one of them we did pay for. So she's been learning a lot and gathering a lot. In addition to that, me, as president of the Maryland Economic Development Association, now I'm done, but our last annual conference was on equitable economic development. And we really gathered a lot of great ideas, spoke to a lot of good people. So she's made some really great contacts with that, so we can continue to grow that program. We encourage it across the board. I mean, not just when we go out and meet businesses and encouraging business growth, but even with our loans. And just, that's how we think now.
Thank you. And I just follow up for that. I know you guys had a fellowship with NLC and Policy Link around equitable development. Can you talk about that? What the
I
benefits
can't, because
were?
I wasn't there. It was
Not yet.
kind of a thing where Bill, Paul Taylor, and Christina Williams went, and Bill's not there anymore, Christina Williams isn't there anymore, and Paul Taylor's in the mayor's office, but it was a fellowship.
So we'll ask Paul.
Yeah. So I would ask Paul about that, but I do know that
Or call Bill.
when I asked Bill about it several occasions after it was over, he seemed disappointed. Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
that's just anecdotally. I
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
know that for a fact.
How many of the jobs that were retained or added for fiscal year 16 to 18 were from outside of downtown? And can you tell us how you calculate that, if you guys track that? For example,
We
in-
track that.
in fiscal 16, there were 697 jobs added or retained. In fiscal 17, there were 895, and in 18, it were 320.
I can get back to you on that because I couldn't have that in front of
it's a
me because
big,
of
big. So, Mr.
our
Chair,
giant attack. But we do have the information on our website
Okay.
for prior years because it's right in the annual report. So we'll get that over to you.
thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Amorose, if we can
It's
just.
a big majority.
Thank you. That's good. We're good.
Can you restate that? Or?
Just we have to have them provide the number of jobs or businesses retained outside of downtown.
Sorry, one more time, tailed off a little at the end.
Nope, that's fine. Jobs retained or added to the city that were outside of downtown for the last 3 fiscal years, Mr. Amorose. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
If you want to pull up our website now, you could probably find it.
I'd like to introduce Councilman Yitzi Schleifer from the 5th District, member of the committee. Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Ms. Clark. And
Good
I
morning.
apologize in advance. I'm losing my voice. This is the wrong time.
So am I.
Wrong time to lose it. My first question is, many people in the city recognize food deserts, but they don't recognize that many parts of our city also are in retail deserts. And God bless you.
Bless you.
And which makes places like Mondawmin Mall even more critical to our city because there aren't a lot of retail options throughout the city. And so for a councilman who I won't name, who represents a certain section of the city, who is often maligned and beat up because I'm the reason Target left. Can you describe the challenges in getting retail to come, and then, as best you can, our efforts to restore some retail to that particular footprint?
Sure. So, interestingly enough, I was just part of a group discussion yesterday as part of a small part of what's going to be involved with, the Urban Land Institute puts out a real estate trends report every year. And so we gathered yesterday for the report that'll come out in the fall for the trends. And one of the big topics was retail and how the national retailers, and especially big box retailers, are borderline not affordable for a developer to do.
Can you say that one more time? I
Yes.
think it's important.
These were developers that were in the room, and it was actually a minority developer that spoke to the point and said that to attract a national retailer is borderline impossible because it is not affordable. Because what they pay in square footage rent does not equal the amount that you have to spend on the tenant fit out for that retailer. And that's not just Baltimore City, that's across the country. He's seeing this, he develops not just in Baltimore, up and down the East Coast. There was another gentleman in the room that has also done some developments in Texas, and he said the same is true there. The difference between a Texas and a Baltimore is that a Texan can develop a greenfield and just has a wide open space. They're not limited in space, so it's a little bit more affordable. But building in an urban area, it's near impossible to attract a national retailer.
And so that being the case, I mean, we still have to do what we can to provide retail.
Correct.
So can you speak to some of our efforts around Mondawmin and then throughout the city to address retail?
So, as everyone probably knows, we attend the what's called ICSC, the International Council of Shopping Centers, also known as RECon, which is the International Retail Conference in Las Vegas every year. We take a team out. We're not the ones sitting by the pool drinking tequila shots. We are the ones in the convention center working from the time the convention center opens until it closes each day, and meetings every half hour with a small break for lunch, and then we're right back at it. The current mayor and past mayors have been right there with us, as have some other elected officials. And it's meeting people. Over the years, we've gotten to know a lot of people, and that's worked out well. Throughout the year, we also send a team to New York and Washington, D.C. to attend the retail conferences. And from that, I mean, it's an ongoing conversation with retailers. So, for instance, if a Rite Aid shuts down, somebody in my office knows who to call at Rite Aid. They don't call the broker, they call Rite Aid and find out what's going on. So we've built some great relationships over the years. Retail is a tough industry, and as the developer said yesterday, the retail struggles are not because of Amazon. It's because of the cost of building retail. It's a whole lot easier to take a big box and build an industrial depot where distribution takes place than it is to build a big box retail establishment. But we've forged relationships, and we hope to continue those relationships. The team works very, very hard. Kristen Dawson, now being head of our business development, is very focused on not just the food industry, but on what we can do to increase and better the business environment throughout the city.
My second question, I think one of the things that this administration and previous administration has done well is try to identify a variety of different resources. And so can you speak to how BDC anticipates using both the Neighborhood Impact Investment Fund and Opportunity Zones to attract investments in areas that we really haven't seen much investment in?
So the Opportunity Zone Coordinator falls under BDC. It's funded through a grant through the Able Foundation. We've already met with the Able Foundation to try to ensure that we can fund that position for another year. Ben's done a great job with trying to marry investors that we might not otherwise see in Baltimore City to our developers in Baltimore City. It's also, what's interesting that you find out there is that what we didn't know prior is that there's a lot of these funds that have a commitment to sort of troubled areas, and they have the money and can invest. So we were able to, or actually the developer was able to attract the Prudential Opportunity Zone Fund to Yard 56, which is the former Pemco site over on Eastern Avenue across from Bayview, a long vacant, blighted industrial site that's now going to be a mixed-use development. And we were able to attract Prudential's Opportunity Zone Fund to that. We try to use as many tools as possible and not just rely upon the NIF or other things, because recognizing that while we are all superstars, that there are other struggles in the city. So we try to look for other ways to use some funds. So again, we applied for some capital funding for some food initiatives, and that was denied. We're always looking at things like that. So we have our ongoing microloan fund. Our VLT fund continues to assist minority and women-owned businesses. So we're on the lookout for everything, not just relying upon things that are created right here in the city.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Schleifer.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
So I was watching from the start on my phone as I was coming down, so I saw your presentation, so thank you. And thank you for your leadership during the transition, as Chairman Costello mentioned. I want to know what your shop's involvement is in the general business permitting process. Like, are your case managers involved with that when you like to help businesses get started, or are they on their own for that piece?
No, so we try, if we know about it, we try to hold their hand and help in any way we can. Many moons ago, when BDC used to oversee urban renewal plans and areas, especially the commercial revitalization plans, we were a sign-off on the permits. We're not so much a sign-off on them, so we don't know about every single one unless somebody brings it to our attention that somebody's struggling with getting a permit. But if we know, like, the more our folks can be out on the street, which now that we're staffed up, we can get more of them out on the street, the more that they know about, especially these small retailers or mom and pop businesses trying to get their permits, they can help. I mean, we've got one guy in the office that, I mean, he can literally just pick up the phone and he gets them the permit. So we try to be as helpful as possible. We don't always know about it, but when we know about it, we're helpful.
Right, because it might be helpful if there's some type of program that might come up through, I know you mentioned about the work you're doing around mom and pop businesses. That's one of the challenges that I see in my district, and I'm sure is being experienced on the 7 other council districts that border the county, is that a lot of businesses that can go in either side of the line have opted to go onto the county side for a variety of reasons. And one of the reasons I've heard is they just feel that it's very challenging to get going in the city as well as to maintain in the city. And so I know that in the cases where some of your staff has been involved, like Garza, he gets the job done. And so, like, if there was some type of program where people like Garza would be able to help potential businesses come into the city side, and there was a widely known program that, we'll have a case manager essentially hold your hand, that can mean the difference between whether restaurants and other businesses decide to stay on our side of the line as opposed to going to the other side of the line, because a lot of these mom and pops, they're just passionate about whatever it is that they're, whatever service they're providing. They don't want to deal with the regulatory stuff and getting the paperwork done. They frankly don't know where to turn, and most of them don't have the money to hire lawyers and other people to do it for them. So if we could provide that service, and maybe even at some point offer incentives, whether it be, if it's certain kinds of businesses in areas that we want them to be, that we could waive certain fees and other things to attract them, that also might be something that would go a long way. Because I see vacant storefronts all over my district and the other districts when I go to them, and then you go to the other side of the line and it seems like things are doing a little bit better, 100 feet down the road.
Point taken. And I've been joined by Will Beckford, Vice President for Neighborhood and Business Development. Will's actually interesting. He'll walk into a business, like a new business, and I'll say, well, you know, did we help get your permit or whatever? So we'll look at that. I don't know about an actual program, but we'll figure out a way to weave it into our visits out in the neighborhoods so that folks know about it. And when we're having these sort of BDC in the neighborhood, we'll make sure that that's part of the whole package.
Right, and even if it's, you know, one-offs, like I can tell
Sure.
you, and Garza and Will knows about also, he's in the area. So when, like in the Hilltop Shopping Center, for instance, I mean, the community, there's stores keep closing, and so being able to target specific stores that we want in there, like, you know, there was a quasi supermarket that was there for a while and is no longer there. So if there was a, you know, small supermarket operator that we wanted, and we would be able to offer them basically a streamlined process of everything essentially being done for them and all permit fees waived on condition that they occupy that location.
Right.
That might be something that, you know, might just tip the scales instead of them going, you know, down the block into Randallstown.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions?
Can I ask one more question? So,
I got Pinkett first, then Steve. Sorry.
Yeah, I just had one other question. The budget book refers or mentions that the with the ETC Eastern ETC closure, that it was a reduction, I guess, of $230,000, and that those dollars were, I guess, reallocated
To 809 and 810.
So can you say specifically what activities are now being funded with that
Kim, hang on.
$230,000?
I'm sorry, hang on. I wanted to recognize Delegate Stephanie Smith, who's in the back. Thank you, Delegate. Sorry, Councilman. Kim, please go ahead.
Sure. So many moons ago, I think it was 3 administrations ago, the administration was very enamored with the Emerging Technology Center, and so just gave them a bump in their budget, which helped. And Eastern was very, very intensive real estate-wise. There was a lot of common area maintenance that we were paying for, so our CAM fees were ridiculous there. When we went to Haven Street, we went to a business service model, and so we've increased the number of businesses that we can actually provide services to, and guidance. When the lease was up at Eastern, it was really kind of a lost leader. It was like sucking us dry. So with doing away with Eastern, there was a surplus now in the ETC's budget. For the last several years, the BDC other services have had to rely upon capital funding to level out our operating, to apply towards operating, which doesn't make any sense, but okay, we've done it. By moving that surplus from the ETC into these other 2 services, we don't have to rely upon capital because we got very little capital this year. Most of our requests were denied, so our capital requests really wouldn't enable us to cover the cost of operations like we have in the past. So they were applied to business retention, attraction, expansion, and real estate development, which is all, I mean, our whole, including the ETC, those are our goals and objectives, is to increase the job and tax base in Baltimore City.
So I guess I have a couple questions. One, are we satisfied that the types of services that an ETC will provide are being provided, I guess, west of Charles Street?
Yes, so I'm sorry, I spoke to you a little bit earlier. So what the executive director has actually been doing, she's meeting more with the private sector incubators, and it enables us to be more nimble. So because the staff at the ETC no longer has to worry about, oh my God, are we going to have enough money to cover Eastern and this, that, and the other thing? By going to a service-based, we can be more nimble. So our biggest growth at the ETC have been the businesses that don't take space at the ETC itself. Like, they don't have a desk at the ETC, but they come in for the services. So to hear about real estate legal, accounting, other professional services that they need to actually establish their business, it enables Deb to be more nimble and can provide services around the city and not just be bouncing back and forth between Haven and Eastern.
No, and I don't, I don't disagree at all with that direction of ETC. I know that I've always been a proponent that when we're providing services as a city, there's always a win-win. There's the actual service that we provide, but then it's also what we bring with our presence. And clearly, Haven Street is not the Haven Street that we used to know because of ETC's presence there.
Yeah, we got pretty beat up when we moved there, if you recall.
Not by me, but because I would love to see that same thing replicated somewhere in West Baltimore, because I just feel like when we plant our flag in first, we have the potential to really cause community economic development where it might not otherwise go if we're not the leader. And so I hope that when other opportunities, not just with BDC, but with other agencies, when those opportunities come along, that we really think about our presence as a catalyst to economic development.
Absolutely.
Even beyond the budget and the service. It's just it's a wasted opportunity, I just think.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Councilwoman Sneed.
I often have this conversation with one of my colleagues in reference to businesses that were going to come here, though, tend to go to Baltimore County. Like, local companies will go to Baltimore County because we have too much red tape. These are all the things. Our taxes are too high. Would that be a true statement?
Well, now that Baltimore County has raised their property taxes, it is and it isn't. Again, Baltimore City is often misunderstood. And I'm going to use the example of this, and I probably shouldn't, but I am anyway. So many moons ago, there was a certain mayor who hired someone from not so far out of state, but out of state, to come and work in their office. And that person bought a house in Rogers Forge. And when we told them, well, that's not Baltimore City, they were like, it's not? So a lot of times it's the lines get blurred, and when people hear Baltimore, we know that Baltimore City is different from Baltimore County, and we know that Baltimore City is not Ellicott City or Howard County. I mean, think about it in your travels, and you tell someone you're from Baltimore, and they say, oh, I have a friend that lives in Columbia. That's like right next to you, right? It's like, well, yeah, kind of, but so it's in thinking about that. But when you look at like permit fees and that sort of thing, it's really not all that different. And we're actually a lot easier to work with in Anne Arundel County. The property taxes have been an issue a bit, but then when you look at our enterprise zone program, which is an entitlement issue, once people hear about those type things, then that whole the county versus the city gets erased, because it's much more economically viable for them to locate in the city in an enterprise zone than to locate in Baltimore County.
Okay, perfect. So you're not hearing that it's because of the council passing different regulations and, okay, thank you.
Are there any other further questions? If not, thank you, Ms. Clark.
Sure.
This hearing is now in recess as we transition to the Fire and Emergency Management Services.